Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with allthingsbbq.com, and this is citrus herb crusted pork roast. Well, with the holiday season fast approaching, it's time to start thinking about those holiday meals. And maybe you're ready to get away from that Thanksgiving turkey or the holiday ham, the same things you do every year. And that's why I want to share with you this recipe today for this pork roast. And when I say pork roast, that's a pretty generic term. What I really mean is any big hunk of pork meat, may have a bone in it, it may not, but it's going to get cooked whole. And today we're going to use a roast that looks pretty familiar to most of you, and that's the Boston butt section of the pork shoulder. But I want to get rid of the bone out of there so we can truss this thing up and slice it to finish. We're not taking it to pulled pork temperatures. We're going to stop shy of that so you get really beautiful presentation on these slices of pork. So we're going to jump in, do a little trimming, and then get this in a brine. So here we have our Boston butt. One side is that fat cap. We're going to mostly leave that intact. The other side, you get this kind of crevice where we tend to come in here and trim out a lot of that stringy stuff that you don't want to end up chewing on later after it's cooked. Today, this is actually also going to be our access point to get to this blade bone, because we want to remove that blade bone completely so we have a boneless roast. So I'm just going to take this a little further than I normally would, all the way down to the end of this tip of this bone right here, and then we can actually just slide the knife right underneath. And this is tricky, I'm not going to lie, you're going to kind of struggle with finagling this because this bone is funny shaped. You can see it kind of dips up here where that blade is, then it comes back down and around. We're just going to work the knife all the way around this piece of bone right here until we've got it completely freed from the roast. This side is the easiest to handle because it's entirely flat. But then once we get to the edge of that, we're going to have to wrap around it and get our knife underneath. And you're essentially just going to follow it until you hit that little ridge bone. And then you're going to work your knife around that as well. You'll lose just a little bit of meat that gets stuck to this blade bone here, but it's not enough to worry about it. So essentially just remove that blade bone. There's some of that meat that's left behind. But now you've got your boneless roast. So since we've already kind of split this, I don't know, about half to two-thirds of the way open, I'm just going to take it a little bit further and butterfly this thing out so we can get our seasoning all inside this pork roast. And at the same time, I can go ahead and clean up all this stuff I normally would, all that fascia, all that stringy connective tissue. Some of it doesn't break down. Some of it kind of does, but has an unpleasant texture, so we might as well just get rid of it. So here it is all laid out now. We're gonna roll this up nicely, but look at all this surface area we have now to put all of our seasoning on. Our herb and citrus crust with all the garlic. That's gonna go inside and outside. So now I'm just looking on the surface of the roast. If I've got any, see like right here, we've got some little cartilage. These little pieces that sometimes get left behind. So we're just gonna clean those out of there. That's usually like one of the trouble spots I'll look to. This is right here at the top of where this crevice opening is. We got that cleaned up. It's looking pretty good. Let's move on to brining. So we're starting with a turkey bath brine concentrate today. This is the lemon thyme flavor. So this is water-based, got a good amount of lemon juice in it, so it actually works from a marinating point of view as well as brining. But beyond that, it's just got a lot of great flavors. So it's got your citrus, it's got lemon peel, it's got orange peel, and then some of the ingredients that we think about are holiday spices like rosemary and ginger. A lot of that stuff in there as well. Obviously a lot of thyme in here. So this all fits really well with the flavor profile we're going for on our citrus herb crusted pork roast. Now we're gonna break down this brine concentrate with a gallon of water. And actually you can go about half on this if you want to save some of that, say for like chicken thighs or another project. We're gonna add also a half cup of kosher salt and just give that a good whisk to dissolve the salt. No need to heat it up or anything. You can keep it right here at room temperature. Get that salt dissolved and it's gonna do its work and work its way into the pork. And that's the other great thing about butterflying this open now is that brine and marinade can work from both sides, and we'll get a lot more flavor and moisture into this piece of meat because of it. You're looking to brine this for about an hour per pound. So that's 8 hours for this pork butt. You can just leave it overnight. Today we're cooking on the Kamado Joe Classic 3 ceramic charcoal grill, and we're gonna be cooking over lump charcoal at roasting temperatures, so up around 400 degrees. Now this is gonna ensure that we get a really great crust on the outside of our pork, and it's gonna cut down the cook time to say 3.5, 4 hours rather than a pork butt that you'd normally cook for like 8 hours. So let's go ahead and get this thing loaded up with our lump charcoal and fired up. We're gonna use the Kamado Joe Big Block charcoal today. To ensure that it really lasts all the way through that cook. And we're also going to put these biggest chunks down here on the bottom to make sure there's plenty of air movement to get around them to the charcoal on top. And once I feel like I've got a good amount of the really bigger pieces, I'll just go ahead and dump some in on top. I'm also going to make sure I've got just a little bit of airflow here in the front so there's always air moving through here. Throw a few fire starters in and let it get going. Now I have a pork roast that's been brined overnight. I put it in the brine last night, took it out this morning, it's ready to go. But before we can get to that, we got to put together this seasoning, this paste that's essentially going to turn into our crust on the outside of the pork roast. Number one ingredient here is garlic. We're doing a full cup of peeled garlic cloves. We're going to add to that a 1/4 cup of sage leaves and a 1/4 cup of rosemary leaves. We've already got plenty of time going on from the marinade, so now we're going to skip straight to olive oil, 1/2 cup of extra virgin olive oil. And then we need a little salt in here, so we're just using the Cattleman's Grill Lone Star seasoning. This is our brisket seasoning: salt, pepper, garlic, celery. Really great flavor base with a good amount of salt. And then comes the citrus. So we've got one really large lemon here. I'm gonna take all of the zest off the outside, and then we're gonna take all of the juice from the inside and add that to the paste as well. That's going to work out to 3 to 4 tablespoons of lemon juice there. So we're going to pop this on the Vitamix and break it down. Yep, that looks pretty evenly broken down. I'll let you guys take a look inside there. Garlic's fully minced and we don't have any big chunks of the herbs, so we're going to call that good. So here we have last night's pork roast. You can see how the acidity from the lemon juice has kind of started to break down the surface, which is fine. That's not going to be a problem. It hasn't been in there long enough to just mushify it yet. And we haven't rinsed this off because I want all those flavors from that marinade right there on the meat. So what we're going to do now is, starting with the inside, we'll take some of this garlic paste. It's going to turn into our citrus herb crust, and just work it into every little nook and cranny in here, so we can kind of season this thing from the outside in, or the inside out, I should say. So once you get that closed up, we're going to hit the outside, and then we're going to truss this up to hold it together. And during the trussing process, we're going to lose a bunch of this paste on the outside, but we're not going to sweat it because we've got it right here in the tray below us. We can pick it right back up and put it right back on. So there's no right or wrong way to truss this. There's some ways that look a little bit more professional and fancy, but when it comes right down to it, all you have to do is put enough string around this thing to hold it together. This is a little bit different shaped roast than a lot. So what I want to do is we're going to go lengthwise first this way, and then we'll do some in the opposite direction so it kind of all holds together. Get a couple of twists on there, 2 or 3. Hold that tight, and then one more to set it. And I've got enough left over here that I can go ahead and just flip this and do this one time here. So there, you've got your initial tie, so you know it's going to hold together. From here, we can just kind of pretty it up. So if you want to do this all at once, you absolutely can. It just takes a little twist, go around and under, then come down to your next tie spot. Just create that loop, go under, slide it down a little bit, and you can kind of just keep working your way down the roast in that way. Create that loop, go over the edge, slide it down a little bit. We'll do that all the way down to the other end. All right, that's looking really nice. So let's just tie this off now. And then we're going to gather up all that paste I talked about was going to come off. We're not worried about it, because we're going to put it right back on. So Kamado is stabilized around 400 degrees now. I'm going to go ahead and throw in a chunk of pecan wood for smoke. Just one chunk will be plenty. You're going to see this is going to get really dark over the next few hours on the surface. It's to create that really beautiful crust. Now the roast is going to go right on top. Putting that fat cap side down to kind of give it a little thermal barrier from any heat coming off that plate. And then I'll just throw a little bit more of this garlic and herb citrus paste around the edges, so we're not wasting any of it. We're going to throw a probe right in the deepest part of the center of that roast. I'll do another ambient temperature probe here on the grill so we can keep track of where our temperature's at with the Fireboard app. We're about 2.5 hours into this cook now, and boy, we're getting a really pretty crust on the outside of our pork roast. Now, my temperature's been dipping a little bit, and as I open the airflow up and discover that I'm going to need a little bit more charcoal, I decided to just go ahead and show you guys how we're going to do that. So I'm just going to pick this up and move it over a little so I can access the charcoal. Now our coal is completely whited over, great red coals in the bottom there, but we're just going to need a little bit more to get through this process. So I'm guessing we've got another hour or so to go. Internal temperature on the pork right now is at about 140. We're aiming for about 180. So that should give us the fuel we need to get through the rest of this cook. All right, let's close it back up and let it keep going. This pork roast has been cooking for just over 3 hours now, about 3 hours and 15 minutes. Getting different readings on doneness, but the bottom doneness level right now is at 175 internal. And that's where we're looking to pull this, 175 to 180. It's gonna rest and that number is gonna come up a little bit. But for now, we're ready to take this right off of here. We're gonna get a little foil on it. Just kind of loosely tint this over the top. And we'll let that sit and rest for at least half an hour before we slice into it. But this has had a good rest now, so we're gonna get our strings off, our butcher twine off here, and slice it up so we can get a taste. So now that we've freed this thing of all of its twine, you get a couple of options on how you can slice this up. That fat cap side's gonna be real barky. I mean, you can hear the crisp on it. So that's not going to be the easiest thing to cut through. If you want to, you can go ahead and take full slices, but remember we butterflied this. So they're going to get cut in half either way. So your other option here is just go ahead and finish that butterfly that we started. And then what we can do is we can slice these separately. We'll still get good sized slices out of them. but it'll be a little bit less of a mess. And I'm smelling all of that citrus and herb right now. And check out that fat cap. See how that's just rendered out? Crunchy, like gooey, sticky goodness. That's beautiful. This is actually what they call that money muscle in competition barbecue. This one really great muscle that runs kind of perpendicular to everything. It's some of the most tender meat on the pork butt, and you can see just how much rendered fat is left in there, keeping it super juicy. Now the fat cap is right here, and that's what you see that's been so nicely rendered, and it's going to be super crunchy. What you can't see there is that bit of a smoke ring that starts to creep up the side, and just kind of a nice visual reminder that we got some smoke on this thing as well. So in turning this money muscle the opposite direction we have been cutting, then you get these really beautiful little juicy medallions of pork. Man, that looks great. Let's get a taste. That fat cap, the way that renders, it also almost reminds you of fried chicken because it's so crunchy and fatty right there. Gosh, just a ton of flavor. Definitely picking up on citrus and herbs. I mean, this has got that holiday feel to it, but it's a totally different presentation than what you might be used to out of a pork butt. This is a great example of how versatile this piece of meat, how this cut of meat is so versatile. From here, I want to finish making this look pretty so we can put it on a platter because the way we've left it, kind of got half of it that's exposed, has not been exposed to the smoke and not so barky, and half that has. I'll show you how we can kind of pretty that up. So we've got that money muscle right there in front, the bottom half of that pork butt that we just sliced. Now let's come in here for the top half and slice it very similarly to how we did the bottom half. Notice the texture on this. When we smoke this or cook this, roast it rather, to about 180, what you get here is you get the fat that's starting to render out, but it's still holding everything together, so it's got a little bite to it. You can totally judge how thick your slices need to be by how much of that fat is rendered out. So say it's feeling a little tough, if you've gone with a thicker slice, just go ahead and slice yourself a little bit thinner slice, and boom, it starts pulling right apart. You can totally adjust that by the thickness of the slice. And there may be spots where it's a bit overdone just because it's like a little nugget sitting here on the end, and that's just gonna wanna shred up. So don't even bother trying to slice that thin because it's just gonna chunk up into these really good little nuggets of bark. So what we can do now is kind of put this back together the way it originally sat and have those nice pretty barky pieces on top. Put out a pair of tongs, you can kind of just grab your own slice of pork roast out of here. And then around the edges, you've got your little nuggets of bark, great texture on there. Anything that fell off onto the board while we were taking the string off, there's tons of little nuggets of flavor in every crevice of this pork roast. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out allthingsbbq.com for all the products featured in today's video. If you enjoy the recipe, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to allthingsbbq.com/thesauce. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.